The sleepy town of Villisca, Iowa, was the kind of place where the only excitement came from church picnics and county fairs. In the summer of 1912, the town's biggest concerns were the heat and the upcoming harvest. That all changed on the night of June 9th, when the peaceful streets bore witness to a horror so profound that Villisca would never be the same again. The Moore family was beloved in the community. Josiah, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and little Paul were known for their kindness and regular attendance at the Presbyterian Church. That Sunday evening, after a lively church service and children's program, 2 young friends of the family, Lena and Ina Stillinger, were invited to spend the night. It should have been a night of laughter and sleepovers. Instead, it became a night of terror. The next morning, Mary Peckham, the Moore's neighbor, noticed something was wrong. The house was unusually still. Normally, the sounds of children playing or Sarah's busy work in the kitchen would greet the day. But the Moore home remained eerily quiet. Concerned, Mary knocked on the door. When no one answered, she fetched Josiah's brother, Ross, who let himself into the house. Moments later, Ross stumbled out, his face ashen. "Call the sheriff," he whispered hoarsely, his eyes wide with shock. Inside, the scene was unspeakable. Josiah and Sarah lay in their bed, their faces unrecognizable from the blows of an axe. The children were found in their rooms, their small bodies lifeless and brutalized. The Stillinger sisters, who had been sleeping in the guest bedroom, met the same fate. The killer had moved methodically, striking each victim as they slept, their faces later covered with clothing or bedding. The townspeople were horrified, but the horror did not end there. The investigation revealed disturbing details. The killer had entered the home quietly, possibly hiding in the attic while the family attended church. After the murders, the assailant lingered, eating a meal from the kitchen and leaving a basin filled with bloody water as a macabre sign of their presence. Despite exhaustive investigations, the case was never solved. The townspeople whispered of curses, demons, and vengeful spirits. The Moore house, now a crime scene, quickly became an object of fear. It stood vacant, a grim monument to the unspeakable violence that had unfolded within its walls. Years passed, but the shadow of the murders loomed large. By 1930, the house was abandoned, its windows broken and its walls sagging with age. Stories of strange occurrences began to circulate: faint cries in the night, flickering lights, and the chilling sound of footsteps when no one was there. Among those intrigued by the stories was Eliza Carter, a journalist with a taste for the macabre. Eliza had made a name for herself uncovering the truth behind ghost stories, and the Villisca house was her next challenge. Skeptical but determined, she arranged to spend the night in the infamous home. Eliza arrived on a cold November evening, armed with a notebook, a flashlight, and a flask of whiskey to steady her nerves. The house loomed before her, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into her soul. As she stepped inside, the air grew heavy, the silence oppressive. The first few hours passed uneventfully. Eliza wandered through the house, jotting down notes about its condition and the eerie atmosphere. The children's room was the most unsettling. Tiny beds stood against the walls, their faded quilts undisturbed. A forgotten doll sat in the corner, its glassy eyes staring blankly. As the night deepened, the temperature dropped. Eliza wrapped herself in a blanket and sat in the living room, waiting for anything to happen. Just as her eyelids began to droop, a faint creak jolted her awake. It came from upstairs. Her pulse quickened as she grabbed her flashlight and climbed the staircase. The floorboards groaned beneath her weight, each step echoing in the stillness. At the top of the stairs, she paused, shining her light into the darkened hallway. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling. There was no response, but the air felt different, colder, heavier. She stepped into the children's room, her flashlight sweeping across the beds. For a moment, everything was still. Then, she heard it, a soft whisper, almost imperceptible, coming from the corner of the room. "Eliza." Her heart stopped. The sound was faint but unmistakable. The doll in the corner seemed to shift slightly, its glassy eyes glinting in the beam of her flashlight. Eliza stumbled backward, her breath coming in gasps. The whisper came again, louder this time. "Eliza." Panic overtook her as she fled the room, her footsteps pounding down the stairs. She reached the front door, only to find it wouldn't budge. Behind her, the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices that filled the air with an almost unbearable cacophony. "Eliza." She spun around, her back pressed against the door. The shadows in the hallway seemed to shift and coalesce, forming the outline of a figure, a tall, hulking presence holding something in its hand. The faint gleam of an axe caught the light of her trembling flashlight. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. The figure took a step forward, and then another. Eliza screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the house itself, as if it had become a living, breathing entity. When Eliza's colleagues came to the house the next morning, they found her notebook lying on the floor, its pages filled with frantic, scrawled words. "They're here. The house is alive. It won't let me leave." Eliza was never seen again. To this day, the Villisca Axe murder house stands as a chilling reminder of the horrors of that fateful night in 1912. Visitors claim to hear whispers, footsteps, and the faint sound of an axe being dragged across the floor. Some say the house traps those who enter, feeding on their fear. But one thing is certain, the shadows of Villisca are never empty, and they are always watching.